Can allow 1 minute for people to grab the last coffee. If you see anybody outside, please tell them to come in. Okay. Okay, I heard we're all good. Thank you all for joining us again. As you heard this morning, my name is Martina De Mayo, and I am the Scientific Director for the International Alliance. It's my great pleasure to introduce our next panel, Regional Research Networks Update, which I will be moderating. So let me introduce the members that will be participating to the panel. Please welcome Nortina on stage, Nortina Shahrizalia. I'm sorry, you can say it. From Pactels, as a representative from Pactels, and then we'll have Janine Hackman as a representative from ALS Africa. I'm loving this walking up the stage. It feels like a preparation for for Family Feud night. And then Jinsey Andrews, who you heard from this morning, from Niels. And Leonard Vanderberg, representation of NCALS. And we have joining us online, Jose Matamala, who is a representative from LATAM. So welcome all in person or remote. The way that this is going to go is that each person will present for 6 minutes. I'm going to have to be very strict, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So Nortina, please take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks very much for the invitation to be part of this panel. So I'm Nortina Shahrizalia. I'm based in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and I'm presenting on behalf of our Pan-Asian Consortium for Treatment and Research in ALS, or Pactels. If we could just move to the next slide. So just a bit of a background. So Pactels was developed back in 2014. And this was during the meeting in Belgium, and these are some of the founding members, which includes Matthew, Gensoboe, Satoshi, and Carol Burks, who was president back during that time. And the idea was really, leaning on the successes from NCALS and also from Niels, and the idea was really to try and bring together member societies or member countries from the Asia-Pacific region to try and raise awareness of MND ALS in this part of the world and try and see if we can do what has been done in terms of collaborative research and also improving the care of patients with ALS in this part of the world. So in terms of, it's been 10 years, but of course, we did have COVID for a period of time in that time. So in terms of what we've been able to do, it's grown, slowly getting stronger and stronger. So this started off really, we were able to kind of bring together all the different members to try and understand a little bit more what was happening with regards to ALS in the different countries. And also, one of the things that you will see, and I will be presenting after this, is the discrepancy in terms of having a lot of, you've got your high-income countries, you've got your low-middle-income countries, and of course, the high-income countries are able to do much more within their own countries, whereas in the low and middle-income countries, you may not see as much in terms of awareness. So the idea was to try and see how we can address this. So part of what we did was to at least have some satellite meetings to start with. And this then accumulated to having an actual meeting of just focused on pactels, and that was in Korea in 2018. And every 2 years, we've been doing a similar meeting. I hosted the last one in Kuala Lumpur. And that in itself has already brought together all the different countries in the Asia-Pacific region. Okay, so you will see here in red, those are the countries that are considered to still be in the low middle income countries, and that represents the bulk of the Asia-Pacific region. And that is where some of the issues that we've had in terms of trying to bring people together, because the funding is not as brilliant as it is in, for instance, North America or Europe, but you will see that Asia-Pacific represents more than 50% of the world population. So I do represent, the part of the world that I feel probably hosts the largest patient population with ALS. It's just that we probably still don't know yet who they are. So some of the challenges that we've had is really in terms of the heterogeneity. Because of the fact that the resources are limited in many of these countries, the level of care is very, very different. And we did a survey and we found that that was certainly the case. And you will see that whatever in terms of publications on epidemiology, the incidence is very much lower than that in the high-income countries. And part of that, certainly I believe, is because patients are being underdiagnosed and under-recognized. Okay, so plans for the future is really to build on what we've done so far. We want to try and do what, Niels and Ankels are doing, and slowly that is happening. It's really to try, we've really seen a lot of this. I was just talking to Kelanit, having seed grants from some of these organizations that some of us have received has already put some of these countries on the map and also allowed us to understand a little bit more about what's happening in the different countries. And I just wanted to end, I think I'm within my 6 minutes, to invite all of you to the next meeting that we have of PACTELS, which is going to be in Melbourne in Australia next year from 7th to 9th of September. And that's it from me, from PACTELS. Thank you very much. Oh, and that's our executive committee.
Thank you so much. That was excellent timing. Yes, please, Janine. Yeah, I was going to suggest if you want to stand up because it's hard to see.
Sorry. Was I supposed
Thank you
to?
very much.
No. We were planning of having you all sit down, but you can't really see the slides, so we're going to go to the front.
Thank you. Just want to see. So we're definitely the newest kids on the block, and we're very honored to be here, part of this esteemed panel. So ALS in Africa has been neglected for a very long time, and the Motor Neuron Disease Association is actually only present in South Africa in 3 large cities up to recently, with an additional organization starting largely as a result of our network in Kenya recently. So we started in October 2022 with the ALS Association seed grant, and we had 4 neurologists at 4 sites, spanning the sort of breadth of Africa, one in West Africa, Abidjan in Nigeria, one in East Africa, Nairobi, Kenya, and then 2 sites in Southern Africa, in Cape Town at the southern tip and Johannesburg, more in the northern parts of South Africa. We've grown a lot. We've gone from 4 neurologists to 7 neurologists, and all 4 sites now have ALS databases with harmonized capture sheets, and we have repositories for storing blood samples. The objective is primarily to transform the experience of patients living with ALS in Africa. And we felt that the only way to really do that was to develop a research agenda, a research platform to attract people to the clinics to be interested in the patients so that the patients can actually benefit from care. We know that we don't have ALS therapies on our continent, largely. Very few people can afford it. And so by improving the clinic environment, you can in fact add 7.5 good quality months to a patient's experience, and this was shown by the Irish group in 2003. So we're building research capacity with personnel, with neurologists, with fellows, neuropsychologists, genetic counselors, and we're trying to do that at each site. It hasn't really happened in all the sites, but we're trying to. And by building this research platform, the patient really, the doctor becomes the therapy for the patients, and the patients are very appreciative of it. They use words such as they feel that they're being embraced, that they're people, that we understand, that we care. And so we are, I think, transforming those lives that we are interacting with. And ultimately, we want to bring treatment trials to Africa. And so by organizing these research-oriented clinics in these sites, we hope that one day we will be able to do that. So we're not in a position to have any meetings at this point, but we want to build capacity. So we have put in funding proposals. But as my colleague has just mentioned, it's very difficult to compete with the resource, the non-resource constrained areas. So I would put a plea in to just consider smaller research grants to help build capacity in the low middle income countries. We've been very fortunate in that one of my collaborators has started a neurogenomics lab, and she received 8 years of welcome funding, and it has allowed us to also look for actionable genes in our patients to basically report what the mutational profile is in our patients, so that we can also attract further, so that we can attract trials one day. So what are the challenges? Well, as already been mentioned, the challenge for us is to keep growing slowly but surely. As I've already said, it's difficult because we have to compete with larger, well-established groups, and we can't compete in a scientific level yet. So that is difficult and challenging. Resource constraints in our setting means that patients don't have access to many things, no treatments, no devices, and we have a limited capacity with researchers being available to us. However, our plans for the future, we are hoping to continue our research platform by looking for funds that, as much as we can. At the moment, we're doing these, as I said, actionable gene analyses on very small research budgets. By increasing genetic diversity in ALS research generally will contribute to discovery, we believe, and ultimately we want to be able to give our patients also access to treatment trials. This is a photo of the neurogenomics lab in Cape Town and the ALS Africa group in Cape Town, and then this is a photograph of the different groups in the other countries. There on the left is the Kenyan group, in the middle the Nigerian group, and on the right is the Johannesburg group in South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Janine. Jinsey, you're up.
Okay, so I'll be talking a little bit about NEALS. You've already heard a lot this morning, so I'll keep it very short and sweet. And this is just a little bit on our background. So as I mentioned earlier this morning, we were established in 1995, so we've had over 25 years of experience, and really trying to keep this organization as a clinical trials rooted in research and advancing treatments for ALS. That has evolved, like I discussed earlier this morning. And initially, a lot of people ask us now, here we are at the International Alliance, they ask, okay, Northeast ALS, what's with that name? And then I follow it up with international. It doesn't make any sense, so I think one of our future plans might be rebranding, but keeping our name as NEALS. But it was initially a group of centers out of the Northeast that kind of grew into this huge clinical trials network. And we've really achieved clinical trial infrastructure, especially in North America, and trying to put the lived experience into clinical trial design, outcomes assessments, and also trying to push the pipeline and actually grow the pipeline for potential new therapies for ALS. And as you saw earlier today, I laid out how there's a group of volunteers. So I'm a volunteer co-chair with Dr. James Berry. There's an executive committee that also volunteers their time, and a lot of subcommittees that specialize in very intricate areas, and they actually grow or evolve over time depending on the needs of the community. And of course, as I mentioned, we are asked a lot to participate in everything that is related to ALS, but the core of the mission is really research and clinical trials and clinical development of new therapies. But that does touch all aspects of ALS, and so we try to leverage the organization in ways or partner with other organizations. In North America and US, we have many organizations that work together that can achieve those goals for clinical care, in addition to research and provide for our community. So upcoming meetings, we do have monthly community education webinar series. This has been our way of trying to interact with the community. We also have virtual ALS clinical research learning institutes. As I mentioned earlier this morning, we try to engage our community into becoming research ambassadors. We need them. We're a big organization, but we're small at the heart with big ambition, and we can't do that without partnering with people with lived experiences and partnering with the organizations that really provide help for our infrastructure, like the ALS Association, and trying to make sure that we're able to leverage our community to help ourselves. And then we have in-person, hopefully we have our in-person ALS Clinical Research Learning Institute. Last year we were derailed by, obviously, the hurricanes. That will happen October 2025, and then we have our annual meeting, which will be probably bigger and better than all of the years previous. The challenge, I just kept it simple. So two main things: member engagement and funding. Funding for a couple of things. One is that, because we're an organization, we don't get funding directly from philanthropic donations from patients. We really do have our member institutions provide membership fees, and that helps provide the main kind of infrastructure funding, but it's not enough as the organization grows and starts new initiatives. So we seek out grants and sponsorship from other organizations, but trying to keep that sustainable is definitely backbreaking work. And I'm sure all of the other organizations can think about, we all probably have the same kind of challenges in trying to think about how to keep all of the organizations sustainable so we can serve the community and serve our academic researchers. And then funding for projects. There's always a lot of ideas. People want to do different things in different areas, and they ask NEALS to help. And so sometimes in order to implement those ideas, sometimes there is government funding, sometimes there's organizations that are willing to fund it in small piecemeal, but sometimes we're just limited. And then membership engagement, it's not so much engaging the members to participate in the consortium. That's done deal. Many people are very passionate about participating in the NEALS organization and participating in clinical trials. But I think for us, it's more of like growing the workforce. We have big ideas, big ambition, and as our organizations all get bigger, we will need more people to serve the people living with ALS. And so trying to get out to medical students, trying to get out to other allied professionals like physical therapists, respiratory therapists, nurses, and others that are involved in care to specialize in ALS and provide those as we get bigger. and also trying to diversify our workforce, especially in the United States when we have a lot of people speak different languages, different backgrounds. We also want the healthcare provider teams and the research teams to reflect that, and trying to make sure that we are able to kind of meet the needs of different cultures is what makes the US beautiful and challenging. And so those are some of our challenges and some of our initiatives for the future. But in addition to those, we're going to try to do member initiatives or annual meeting initiatives that we can dedicate to trainings and workshops to meet the changing landscape for clinical trials in ALS, and we're going to try to rearrange our agenda to meet some of the needs and comments from previous meetings. We're going to try to do something a little bit different this year. So I talked about strategic partnerships earlier today, and we have partnered with industry, we've partnered with people living with ALS, but we also want to make sure, because there's so many organizations that support ALS in different ways, we want to be a conduit to try to bring everybody together. And so we're doing these organizations roundtables and trying to create partnerships like that. And then we also want to continue our collaborations with industry through scientific advisory board meetings and NEALS affiliated partnerships, where it'll be a two-way street to try to develop ideal clinical trials, and also to continue to expand education and training opportunities, and hopefully develop programs for younger individuals that are earlier in their training, so that we can draw people into ALS, because we really are going to be in a crisis in a few years as the population ages. And with that, I'll conclude.
Thank you so much. We're going to hear from Leonard.
Yeah. Well, I'm Leonard Wenenberg, chair of NCALS. Great to be here in Montreal. In 2026, this meeting is going to be in Amsterdam, so that's the only Dutch part of this presentation. So I hope you all join. I don't think it has been announced officially yet, so don't tell anyone yet, I'll be in trouble. NCALS, we started off as European ALS Consortium. If you try to pronounce that in an abbreviation, it's ELSC or something like that. So we changed the name, so you can do it, Jinzi, with Niels as well. We changed the name into NCALS, which just sounds a lot better. The goal is to encourage research among our centers in Europe as much as we can. So these are the countries, 25 countries are involved, 79 centers. We have an executive board, a program committee of the yearly meeting, and an award committee we present an award yearly for the best young investigator. So these are the people on the board, so this is the boring stuff, and this is the program committee, and this is the award. So Amar and Orla are chairing those committees. So we have yearly meetings, and it's a little bit different than Niels, where they have the same time always in Florida, which is very nice, very good. But we change around Europe to go to in a city where there is an ALS center. So the next one will be with Adriano Chio's center in Turin in June 3rd to 6th. So it'll be nice and sunny. So if you want to join, you're welcome. Well, we have done, and several collaborative research projects are ongoing, funded by the EU, the Joint Programme for Neurodegenerative Diseases, and the EU funding. We have in Europe some large population-based cohorts in Ireland, Netherlands, and in Italy, and we combined the data, but we also combined the data from all the other countries. The projects that we started off with were on genetics, and from that we started Project Mine, which is now a global effort to combine whole genome sequence data into one big data set. And we also combined data sets on environmental and lifestyle factors, and also I think the NCALS survival prediction model has been quite successful, based on population-based databases and other databases throughout Europe. 11 data sets from 9 countries, over 11,000 patients, and now that is being used in trials to include a wider population of ALS patients into trials. We also developed outcome measures, the ECAS for cognitive changes, and the staging system developed by Omar. A project within NCALS is TriCALS, which is a trial consortium. It's a little bit more exclusive, so you can only be part of TriCALS if you see at least 60 new patients each year, and if you have well-trained staff. So that's a consortium now in 19 countries, almost 70 centers. We have several activities. So we collaborate with pharma, we raise study awareness among patients, we help with protocol development and regulatory issues, and we do feasibility among Europe for trials, and we help with recruitment and site management. And what we've done so far within TriCALS is that we started TriCALS. We have a master protocol approved by the EMA. We talk to the EMA a lot to help us to do better trials, also to approve more drugs more easily. We have a patient registry, and we have well, this is about the NCALS prediction model. We incorporated that now into trials. We have we started the TriCALS Academy, which is a platform to train for outcome measures, and we recently also included the neurophysiology outcome measures. So it's an ongoing project, and more outcome measures are incorporated in that. We launched INARC, which is now an international consortium of trial staff, so of the nurses and the trial coordinators in trials, that they talk also more with each other and encourage collaboration among them as well. And we have the master class next year in February, where we invite industry and all the ALS centers to discuss how we can do better trials and more trials. The last slide. I'm doing okay on time, am I? Yeah, I've been warned.
1 minute.
Yeah?
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay, I only need 30 seconds this time.
Beautiful.
So that's good. So please come to Amsterdam, 2026. And but this is an important slide. This is about the database. We're setting up the European database. It's called Precision ALS. It's run from Dublin. Orla Hardeman, and it's a prospective database for all kinds of patient information and data on patients, and also it's also a prospective database, so we're collecting data prospectively. Okay, that's it.
Fantastic. And on time. We have Jose Matamala from LATAM, so please take it away.
Yeah, good afternoon to everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to the meeting, to this regional research network meeting. My name is Jose Manuel Matamala. I am a neurologist from Chile, and I am a member of the LATAM Executive Committee. And in the next 6 minutes, I will talk about the LATAM, this Latin American ALS Consortium. So next slide. ALS in Latin America, and why we should do research. So we have an important population in Latin America. 7% of the world population is in our region. In our region, we have just a small number of ALS studies so far, so there is a lot to explore. We have a mixed genetic background with potential novel genes to discover. Also, we have poor access to ALS care and poor access to drug discovery trials, so there are a few things that we need to improve. Next. We have also some regional strength. We have a linguistic and cultural homogeneity. Our patients have strong commitment and willingness to participate in research. We have also strong networking skills and social support for ALS care. Next slide. So a year and a half ago, a group of colleagues from different Latin American countries decided to emulate other regional research networks, and we create LATAM. And LATAM is a network of centers, clinics, scientific academic groups, and other institutions in Latin America dedicated to research and clinical care in ALS MND. And we include colleagues from Mexico, Cuba, Guatemala, Salvador, Costa Rica, Puerto Rico, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, and Paraguay so far. Next slide. We have an executive committee made up of 4 colleagues from South America and 1 from Central America who represent the entire network. Next slide. And our main objective is to develop a research network in Latin America to advance in the understanding and treatment of our ALS patients. Next, we really think if we improve research in our area, also we are going to improve clinical care and education. Next slide. So what kind of projects have we been working on over the past year? First was to identify colleagues from different Latin American countries to form the LATAM Research Network. So far, we are around 70 members from different countries. Second was to identify priorities in the region. And we have identified that characterize our population is one of our first priorities in terms of the epidemiology, clinical features, and also genetic background. That is really important, and we are going to put our efforts in trying to advance and do this, move forward in terms of do research in that areas. And our third project was to organize the first LATAM symposium. Next slide. So the first LATAM symposium was held in Campinas, in Brazil, on the 17th and 18th of October this year. Next, it was a 2-day symposium with more than 28 lectures and 30 research abstracts. It was a really fantastic symposium with a unique opportunity to exchange ideas between colleagues. In this symposium, we decided our research priorities, and we are working on that during this month. Next slide. So our challenges, we have a significant heterogeneity in terms of access to research and clinical resources among Latin American countries. So it's something that we need to work on. Also, of course, we have lack of research funding locally, and we need to apply for more global research grants. And of course, it is tricky to compete with more formal or organized research groups. And also there is lack of interest in involving Latin American countries in development, in the development of new ALS drugs in clinical trials. We are underrepresented in that manner. So we need to also improve that. Our patients have the right to participate in clinical trials, and I think is one of our priorities too. Next slide. So our plans for the future, for the next year, is to develop the administrative and financial status that will govern LATAM in the future. We are going to initiate the first Latin American multi-center ALS registry, and that is a top research priority for us. We want to know how many patients do we have, their features, and then move to starting our genetic characterization of our population. And the third is to perform the second LATAM symposium, again in Brazil next year. We have decided to do one symposium per year, at least for the first 4 to 5 years, to improve, try to move forward our research, try to apply for grants, and try to do better in terms to have an impact in our region. So thank you, and we look forward to sharing ideas and working together to improve the understanding and care of ALS. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much to all the presenters. We're gonna open it up for questions from the audience and here and online, so please come forward with questions. I see one question. Hi, and please introduce yourself.
Hello. David Taylor from ALS Canada. I wanted to say how incredible this is as well. Just from a global standpoint, 10 years ago, thinking about this panel in this way is incredible and so amazing to see. And also just wanted to throw it out there and ask perhaps Jinsey and Leonard, would there be ever an opportunity, or maybe amongst nonprofits in the space, to think about some sort of support for cross-pollination, travel and registration for some members of these other networks to go to Neil's meetings and NCAL's meetings, and vice versa, making sure more of the key opinion leaders from each of those networks are going to meetings in those regions. I know it already happens, but really pushing that to try to help lift all boats around the world.
I can go first?
Yeah, go.
Sure.
Please.
I think I can speak for Niels in that, and I think Dr. Matamala was one of the recipients of the Travel Awards to come to Niels, but we, because of earlier when I presented about Niels and talked about the Global Research and Outreach Working Group, the GROW Committee, there were regions that were looking to develop, and they wanted to develop centers, and so they reached out to us, and so this committee was formed. It's not necessarily we're going out to those regions, and the goal is really to help them develop so that they can connect with their region's consortia. But in doing so, sometimes they just want to attend the Niels meeting, and we try to accommodate. We've brought people in from different consortia, and we'd love to bring the consortia leaders in, I think, within our funding limits, right? So I think if there was a way that we could think about projects that we can work together and maybe seek out grant funding for that so that we can provide travel opportunities and attendance opportunities, not only to Niels and NCALS, but maybe me and Leonard want to go over here to Elatam's next symposium. So I think it's really important for us to do that, and that way we can address the needs in a more global way rather than a regional. There's needs for regional things to be addressed, but as a global ALS community, there are things that we could achieve.
Yeah, I just also want to confirm that I would love to go to Brazil. But no, yeah, at NCALS in Barcelona last year, we had we sponsored several groups from South America to come to Barcelona. We had a special session on the topic of population-based studies, I think, in South America as well, and Europe. And yeah, in Sweden, we did not have that, but it's a good point. Yeah, we should do that more often, and we'll do that in Turin as well. Good point, David.
Thank you. There's another question here, or? I see one here.
Thank you. This is Pablo from the ALS Association of Argentina, from the Board of Directors of the Alliance. I heard Dr. Matamala, and actually I felt excited about the future projects of ELATAM. And specifically, I wanted to ask Dr. Matamala about the ALS registry, the Latin American ALS registry. How are you planning to approach that effort?
Thank you. It's a good question. We have a working group that we have decided in the first ELATAM symposium. So we are like 5 or 6 colleagues that are working together to try to define the minimum data that we want to collect across the region. There are different initiatives. Brazil have their own ALS registry. I have started a registry here in Chile. There are some projects also in Colombia, and their own registries have some differences. So we want to try to find the common variables and the minimum variables to just advance and do a very simple Latin American registry. We want to apply for grants too. We're thinking in NIH grant to apply. We need funding. It's impossible to do a Latin American registry we have a lot of countries with different resources and try to do a registry. We need funding. But we are working now in the variables and in where we're going to use REDCap as a lot of other registry, and where we're trying to starting and then applying. Because if we wait to have money for this, we're not going to start. we're not going to start never.
Thank you. That's an excellent point. Anybody else has a question? Okay, I don't see any raised hands, so I'm going to ask a question to all of you. I agree with what's been said by David. This is amazing to see you all here or virtually connected, and I think this network, this global network that's coming together, it can be really enriching for all of the members involved. And so I'm asking each one of you for just a brief comment, 1 or 2 minutes, on what you're looking forward to learn from this connection. Oh, well, that's not good. What are you looking forward to learn from this global connection, from the peers on this panel, and generally from the other organizations here? We can start with Dr. Matamala online, if that's okay, or if anybody else wants to go first.
I can.
Okay, Jinsi, go ahead.
Yeah, why not?
Dr.
I think I have been looking forward to this for a long time. And I think one of the areas where I think global collaboration is really important is in the US, as we moved towards developing drugs that were ready for regulatory review. Many of these trials were done in multiple countries across the world. And what was frustrating when I'm sitting with the FDA explaining the rationale and understanding their criteria for evaluation for approval is that their criteria may be a little bit different than another country or region's approval requirements for that regulatory authority or that governing authority. And so when I asked actually the interim commissioner at the time about some of the disparities, their response was that there was a lot of work done between regulatory authorities for preclinical requirements and standardization of, like, for example, toxicology and animal studies and studies required to bring a experimental therapy into clinical trials. But there has not been that kind of level of work done on a global scale for regulatory authorities for clinical trial data. So it's not just for ALS, but it would be great for ALS. So requirements for accelerated approval, requirements for or conditional approval, or full approval, getting global harmonization of what we as the scientific community and people with lived experiences feel is the right bar, and harmonizing that. So we have to come up with that and then help them adopt it. And so this is where I think the International Alliance has been helpful, and also this type of meeting on a regular basis could be helpful going forward in the future.
Well, Leonard, if you want to answer that.
Oh.
I see you. Oh, sorry.
No, go for it.
No.
You go ahead.
No. Listen, I have 6 kids at home. I'm always the last one.
6 kids. I don't know how that refers to me. Okay. I think. So I'm from Malaysia, which is not one of the high-income countries. So I apologize if I'm not representing the other countries within PACTELS when I say this. But just like what Jose Manuel had said, and also what Janine had said, for us, the reality is that it's not about, doing research at the level of, finding a drug. We're actually trying to get research just to raise awareness, just do the simple genetics. So one of the things that I'm looking forward to here is we really need industry to be interested in the rest of the world, because that engagement, there are no clinical trials happening in many countries, in PACTELS for sure. And also, Jose Manuel had mentioned also in Latin America, and I'm pretty sure also in Africa. So I think we, kind of need industry to be aware that the majority of patients are going to be in these other countries, and just that support of having a clinical trial really can develop the care that's being delivered, just also by raising awareness and supporting the care that we can deliver to patients with MND ALS in these resource-limited settings.
I absolutely agree and underscore what everything you said. But I think the other important thing is to say thank you to the Alliance for allowing us to have this conversation and for you to hear what we've got to say. I think that's very important. And just being part of this conversation will enthuses us to continue our work, which is not always easy because there is, it's difficult. It's difficult to continue when there's not a lot of resources. But it's worth it. I think for our patients, it's worth it. I think.
Yeah, maybe two things. One is, so I think the US and Europe have done many projects before, many trials before. And even now, we're at the stage that actually last year, we had to confirm 2 phase 2 trials in Europe that were actually not successful, the Emmerich drug and edaravone, that there was actually no reason to prescribe that to our patients. It was kind of frustrating. I thought, well, actually, yeah, I mean, that we should avoid in the future, that we also let the regulatory people talk to each other, and that we do more trials on a global level, and that because, yeah, I'm talking to you guys because this is very confusing for patients, and that there's a drug available in one continent and not in the other, and then the other continent confirms that it's actually not effective, and then it's taken from the market. I think that's not good for the field. The second thing is that it is important, I think, also for us. We're now, for the first time, together at one table. Next time, I think David has to pay for South America to be here as well, Dave. It's good we haven't known, because otherwise we would have sponsored him.
I know.
Yeah. But no, it's important that we talk to each other. I think, yeah, so the message is that collaboration on a scientific level, but also on any other level, it's very hard work, and the Alliance probably can confirm that. It's not always as easy as it looks from the outside. Okay, we'll start NCAL. It's a lot of work, people are involved, people are sometimes not jealous, but just a little bit, yeah, that happens in the US too, is it? That people don't think that they could do better, but so it is also to organize a meeting, et cetera, it's hard work, and we should support each other as much as we can. We started off ANCALs, we know about the governance, how we should do that. So yeah, I'll be very much available to help if that's necessary. Yeah, please talk to ANCALs if you need any help. I talked a lot with Merit Sikowicz in the beginning when we made ANCALs more useful, how she had done it in the beginning, and et cetera, et cetera. So please,
Yeah, I think it's important. You make a very good point. It's important to leverage existing consortiums to see how it can help developing consortiums. I think also the fundamental rights that we talked about for individuals living with ALS is a guide. So that was discussed this morning, and helps to elevate what we need to do to standardize the care and that every person living with ALS globally deserves. So I think the clinical care and developing the centers, and then the research, and developing those consortiums to be sophisticated so that they can work with their local regulatory authorities, I think will help to bring those trials. Also, highlighting the consortium. So Tina, I had a chance to meet Tina for the first time because of COVID.
Zoom.
Yeah, by Zoom. This is the first time I'm meeting her in person. And so incorporating regional networks, highlighting them in meetings like this so that sponsors or industry partners can see that there's a consortium that exists there that can do a clinical trial or are willing to do it is important. And I think as we develop more therapies, understanding its effects in different populations, especially in the US, we're very aware of this. So partnering with PACTALs or with Africa or with ILATAM, because we have people living with ethnic origins from those countries, will be really critically important, not for just genetics, but also for therapies.
Yeah, another challenge will also be how we collaborate with industry.
Yes.
I mean, we all want to do more trials, and we need industry to do more trials, but we also want to be, and we want to stay, independent organizations. So we should represent our centers, our patients, in an independent way. And that I think is probably also an issue for the Alliance. If you sponsor too much by industry, you lose your independency, especially if there's a drug that will become available.
Thank you. Can we hear from our online guest?
Yeah, sure. Totally agree with you guys and with Tina. I think we need to do clinical trials in Latin America. Every patient that go to my clinic are looking for be part of the drug development, and that is a key thing that I really need to push. And the other thing that we could learn from this network is, learn from you the management of this the network, your experience in trying to build up a registry, the experience that you have in terms of doing research and collaborative research like Project Mine and other research projects. I think we can learn a lot from you. The mistakes that you have been doing, the successful things that you have done, and try to don't adapt those things to our reality, because our reality is different. It's different in terms of legal things, it's different in terms of cultural things. So looking forward to learn and also looking forward to try to bring clinical trials to Latin America.
Thank you so much. I think we are up with time, but please join me in thanking our panel, online and in person, for the wonderful presentation.
Great moderator we had.
I know, yeah. Thank you, really appreciate that. But because I'm so great, I'm gonna turn the moderation over to Richard Patel. Thank you.
Yes, we should leave.
Okay, so good to be back, and I'll be moderating the rest of the sessions. So we have a tag team to begin the afternoon with Tammy Moore and Lyda Ugelna. They'll be talking about the sort of a Canadian experience, lessons learned in advocating for access to therapies in Canada, a case study for Albrioza or Redivrio, depending on yours. So Tammy and Lyda, please.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you all for being here today. I'm Tammy Moore. I'm in this capacity as the CEO of the ALS Society of Canada, and I'm joined by Lyda Ugelna, who is the manager of our Advocacy and Stakeholder Relations program. And I really look at this talk as kind of a continuum, in an odd way, of some of the talks that we've given in the past when we've been talking about access to therapies. In this case, we're actually talking about the withdrawal of the access to a therapy, or withdrawal from market of an access. What we're going to cover off today is actually a little bit about the process and some of the considerations that go into how we advocate, because it directly relates to some of the lessons learned and some of the things we'd like to see carried forward. We're going to talk about the case study itself, how did it come to be and what happened, and then what are the global implications as well. And we have a sneak peek at the very end of our slides of something a bit different as well. We think, too, that this is an important consideration, an important talk that we wanted to give today, because in our community, we're starting to see more therapies come forward. And if we take some of the lessons learned here, maybe we can build on them, and maybe we can avoid some of them for the future. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is actually the Canadian Consensus Framework for Ethical Collaboration. And this is an important tool that we came back to, and actually I really like how Leonard set us up so well to talk about this aspect. And it is, how do you maintain your independence when you're working with industry? How do you make sure that you've got the right kind of environment to be able to work in. And so the Canadian Consensus Framework is built out of work that has been done at the Asia Pacific Economic Consortium, and it's 26 different economies that have come together. And you'll find often there's industry guidelines and different things, but this is one that we work under. And it really takes into account the different groups. It takes patient organizations, healthcare practitioners, pharmaceutical, medical technology industries as well. And it's based upon 3 principles: patients first, collaboration and partnerships, and accountability. So when we look at it, patients first, obviously it's about the health and safety, and is this in the best interest of our patients? Collaborations, and the consideration of how do we inspire trust. The relationships must be transparent, and they must deliver greater benefits and services to our patients. And accountability, when we look at it, it's a code of ethics. It's, again, how do we preserve high professional standards and uphold integrity? And we'd like to see this and be a part of this when it comes to helping the other members within the Alliance as well. And the Alliance has its own set of industry engagement guidelines. Again, quite similar, patients and caregivers first, the alignment of values and making sure that we're clearly defining what are those collaborations, how are they gonna work together, and that transparency. And a lot of it comes down to that independence. Okay.
So before we dive in further, I just wanna walk us through the brief history of the therapy. So in 2021, Amylyx filed for the regulatory review with Canada and the US. And in 2022, we actually saw that Canada was the first country to approve the therapy under the name Albrioza, and the US followed suit shortly after and approved the therapy under the name Relivria, 2 different names just to make things confusing for us. In Canada, it was approved under the Notice of Compliance with Conditions pathway, with the conditions depending on the outcome of the phase 3 clinical trials. And in the US, rather unconventionally, during the second advisory committee meeting, the FDA asked Amylyx to make a promise that should the phase 3 clinical trials do not show efficacy, that they would pull the therapy from the market. Amylyx did make that promise. However, it's a non-legally binding promise. Like I said, it was quite an unconventional one. In 2023, the European Medicines Agency adopted a negative opinion on the approval of the therapy based on their concerns around the phase 2 data. And in 2024, where earlier this year, Amylyx announced that the phase 3 clinical trials did not meet endpoints and that they would be removing the therapy from the market. So when Amylyx announced the results of their phase 3 trials, they were proactive in letting the community know that they would be discontinuing the therapy. In Canada, under the Notice of Compliance with Conditions pathway, that pathway accounts for situations like this, where if a therapy does not show efficacy in the phase 3 trials, meaning for this case they didn't meet their conditions of approval, Health Canada is able to remove the product from the market without depending on the company to do so. And a similar process exists with the FDA as well under the accelerated approval pathway. But the issue is that Relivria was not accepted under the accelerated approval pathway. So in those situations, without that formalized process, the FDA rarely ever removes an approved product from the market. Like I said earlier, Amylyx did make a promise to remove the therapy, and they ultimately did keep that promise, but it was a non-legally binding one, so it did create an interesting situation and overall led to a lot of lessons learned. So I'll turn over to Tammy to walk us through some of those.
So first, let's look at it in consideration of the consensus framework that we talked about. Did this follow what we were hoping? And the answer is yes in a lot of cases. We really felt like the company did work well. They talked and communicated and engaged stakeholders. They did put patients first. They were early looking at priority in the regulatory process to make sure that patients, clinicians, and the organizations were really well engaged. You know, another check mark for the collaborations and the partnerships, building those key relationships and then managing that communication so that we had an understanding of what was coming and we could have the appropriate understanding of what we would need to do next. And then accountability. When it comes to being able to look at the announcements and things like that, the fact that the company came forward very quickly, it really did work. When we looked at them and the consideration of discontinuing, it was timely and accurate information. We've seen in other cases where that hasn't happened, and it is even more confusing for our community and something that we are concerned about. So we were pleased at the way this came forward. They were transparent and proactive, and in fact, that's what we heard from Health Canada, that the company took a very responsible approach to this, and they approached Health Canada to withdraw the drug from market versus Health Canada trying to come at them to get them to remove it from market. And that really, again, helped, and they were engaging us in the process of looking at what would that wind down period look like. And then that engagement, as I've just mentioned, with Health Canada directly made a big difference. And I think we're always concerned about how does the ALS community get viewed in light of the regulators, and what is that we're really setting up not even for these therapies, but for next therapies. And so by having that positive engagement right off the bat, it helps to ensure that we've got a good environment that's constructive. But where are there opportunities? And I think it's in the uncertainty regarding continued access. So although they said that they were going to be withdrawing the drug from market, and this was in the summer, it took until December for that drug to come through. And while we appreciated that time for people who did feel they were getting benefit, even if there was no clinical efficacy that was proven, it was important for them to have that time. And so just a bit more clarity around that would have been helpful. And then there's the unclear responsibility for ongoing cost. So at that point, it was who is responsible, because this drug had gone through the entire regulatory approval process, all the negotiations within our provincial healthcare systems, and with insurance companies. And so who in that process, after they've decided that the drug, after the phase 3 trial came out, who should be paying for that cost? And we have to think about what is the cost of that to the overall system in this time frame as well. So there are some lessons learned. The first, and especially as we think about other therapies that might be coming through a similar pathway, that early and ongoing engagement with stakeholders, it really is essential. It helps to build those relationships and understanding and establish a very clear set of expectations. Again, I would encourage you to look at some of the work that's been done by the Alliance with the industry guidelines, but as well, there is a group, and we'll be sharing, I think, some information in the coming year around ethical guidelines, because they can really help to guide your organizations and set up a very clear set of framework that you can consider looking forward. Lesson number 2, this is a tough one for our community, balancing speed with proven effectiveness. We all want therapies for our community, but I think it's safe to say we all want therapies that have efficacy associated with them. And so that's going to be that balance that we see when you have promising phase 2 data in a very small population. It's going to be a challenge, because when we're having to wait for a phase 3 trial, we know all too well that our community does not have time to wait. But on the other hand, what is the cost to the community when they are taking a drug that may be safe but isn't efficacious? And what are the resources that are taken out? And it's not just the cost of that therapy, it's the clinics themselves, it's what the resources taken from people who may be taking the money out of their own homes and their own personal situations to pay for a drug that's not efficacious. And I think in the case of Albrioza, we had the experience where for that therapy, it at least was in phase 3 trial at the time that they applied to Health Canada. Not all therapies necessarily are at that point if they're going to be applying, and what kind of extension of time frame does that take? And then lesson 3, transparency and consistent communication builds trust. And again, that's an important aspect and kind of builds off of lesson 1 in some ways too. It's setting up those really clear guidelines at the outset, and then making sure that that continues through. And as organizations that are supporting our communities, we have to hold industry accountable too. It's great to have a press release that comes out and talks about all the great things. It's also important to have that press release that comes out when things didn't go as we expected and as planned. And making sure that we're holding industry to account on that, and that we're working with them. And we can say that we've got some very effective relationships with our industry partners who've been very good partners in being able to do things. But it also is because we've built some of these relationships over time, and we must ensure that that we don't get complacent in that. So in all, it's a checklist for ethical collaboration, making sure that we have the good guidelines in place, prioritizing early and transparent engagement with stakeholders, centering the needs and voices of our patients and caregivers in our advocacy efforts, balancing optimism with healthy skepticism, elevating outcomes of partnerships to ensure they align with your guidelines and advocacy goals, and maintaining accountability across all stakeholders.
So in terms of the key takeaways, regulators need to balance between providing early access to promising therapies that have no safety concerns and making sure that systems are in place to verify their long-term efficacy. Clear accountability frameworks need to be established to make sure that the costs of ineffective therapies are not passed on to the system, but are instead borne to the companies. So perhaps integrate that into their marketing authorization plan is an option. And in saying all this, we are sensitive as to how the Canadian market will be viewed for applications with phase 2 data and very small cohorts to demonstrate the efficacy. And I'm sure more learnings will uncover themselves as more therapies come through the pipeline. Tammy, I'll pass it back over to you for that exciting update.
Yes. So that kind of concluded the first part about the access. We did want to bring some late-breaking news, and you've heard about some of it earlier yesterday, and then also some of the great stuff that Carlos had to share in terms of good news and things to keep us going. So we did want to share just a brief update about a program that we've been working on for 2 years. And it really is an exciting aspect because it is a way that we were able to secure funding for the multidisciplinary clinics within Ontario, as well as for the services that ALS Canada provides directly to community. So our community leads who are out throughout the province of Ontario, and if you thought Canada was big, Ontario is a very big province, so we have people that are serving people in their homes. And then our equipment program as well. And so this was a significant win. The investment that we've received, that we're anticipating, will be over $13 million over the next 3 years. Devil's still in the details of how that funding, exactly the 3 years looks, but our ask was $6.6 million a year. And what we're anticipating is actually, it's the fiscal year of the government, so we're anticipating that by March 31st, we will have received the first tranche of almost $800,000, and then the subsequent 2 years will have the rest of the funding. Again, why we didn't bring a full presentation is that we think that there will be more updates and learnings to go along with it. But what's important about this program and what we really wanted to highlight was that this was based upon clinical guidelines or best practice recommendations that we worked with the clinicians to produce several years ago. And it was from that we were able to establish what every clinic should have, as well as the services that are provided by our society. And we were able to utilize that to come up with a per patient requirement and take that to our government with a dollar ask associated with it. And the way we articulated the problem was that government, you didn't understand there was an issue before because, frankly, the costs have been borne through residual hospital operating budgets and philanthropy. And it's time that that changes. It is unsustainable and inappropriate because, in essence, what we're providing is healthcare resources and they need to be provided for as such. And it was the strength of the collaboration that got this through. So it was one principal clinic that brought it forward to us, and we worked together on it and then rolled it out to the other clinics for sign-on. And we had to absolutely be lockstep together to be able to get this forward. And we had to draw some hard lines in the sand, and we were looking at some very significant changes to our equipment program to really draw that line in the sand. But what we started to say was, if nothing changes, nothing changes. And so why would the government pay for something that they were already getting for free? So this is where we had to make a change and we had to put a definitive time frame to it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made the change. And then working with the clinic, we had to be able to be completely together. So there was no opportunity for us to divide. And at times it was like, we'll just take something, let's go. It was like, no, if they divide us, they will conquer us. We need to be together. So we were very excited to be able to have this funding. It really validates the services that we provide through our society. It really makes it that the government sees that value and is willing to invest in it. And it really brought together the clinics and ALS Canada in a very strong way. So this is a kind of advocacy that I think can be a model of how we can collaborate together to be able to solve some bigger problems. So we're happy and excited to be able to share this with you. We know that there will be more updates to come, and we would love to talk to you about it in the future.
So thank you so much, Tammy and Leida. So very inspiring questions. Over there, Norm.
Thank you. I'm Norman McIsaac. Congratulations to ALS Canada on your big win in Ontario. I would like to give the patient perspective on Albrioza. One thing I noticed in several presentations is we talk a lot about patient involvement. And I worked for all my career in international cooperation. And we use a term called participatory development. And I realized after I wrote the manual for the Canadian government that in fact we were making excuses for top-down systems. And we were controlling the process and projects, but we had to involve the participants. In my career, I learned that this is a backwards approach. We should be supporting leadership from the patient community. And happily, we've been talking about this for nearly 10 years, Tammy. And that's how the Kali was born, to form patient leaders and equip patient leaders to lead. And that was inspired by the Curly of Niels. I think I remember I started a parliamentary petition at that time, and everybody told me to wait. It wasn't time. And as a patient, I'm impatient. And so I went ahead and harnessed, created links with patient groups in their societies across the country. And together, we managed to get 25,000 signatures from every province and every territory in Canada. And the reason, and I thank ALS Canada for supporting that. But I think we have to be careful in the way we frame things, because we should not only control their process and involve patients, we should allow spaces and training for patient leaders. And ALS Canada has successfully done that. But the patients have one advantage. Our lives are on the line, and we are impatient. So keep it in mind, all of you. Please don't frame it as patient engagement. Frame it as providing space and tools for patients to act as effective advocates. Thank you.
Thank you, Norm. And that is a very important aspect. Norm was referencing the Canadian ALS Learning Institute built off of the Curly that really has helped to create incredible ambassadors, and we have a number of them in the room today, making sure that the people in our community are well informed and well equipped to be able to participate in even things like Health Canada. The very first patient listening session they did was with the ALS community, and it was largely a number of community ambassadors who are engaged in that. Norm's also part of our advocacy committee, our national advocacy committee. And when it came to the success of the provincial program, it was really our patient community that pushed it over the line. Lida happened to get the text phone number for our premier, who she shared with a couple of our patient community, and they were the ones that were texting the premier. And the premier responded. Not only in text, but he actually called one of the families. He spent 10 minutes with them on the phone and said, I can't promise you anything, we'll see what we can do. And he did not promise he would call them back, but he did the very next day because he was so moved by their story, and he told them that we had the money. Now, our premier says a lot of things, so we didn't trust it right out of the gate. But what we heard was, it was the stories, it was the real life realities of it. And we have people living with ALS who are on our advisory council that really help to make sure that our work is well informed and that we're bringing forward the priorities of our community. But thank you for framing it that way, Norm. I appreciate it.
So thank you so much. I think we have to move on. Okay, so our next presentation will be from Alison Bollett. So understanding inclusion in clinical research, learning from the pilot clinical research listening tour.
Thank you. Not quite as tall. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here, but I have to say, I didn't see where Tammy walked down to, but I'm feeling a little PTSD right now because last year during our presentations, we had to say the word Canada as many times as you could to win socks. I don't know if you remember that. So stressful. I did get one pair of red socks, but I also closed down the party last night because I noticed they were sitting on the tables, and I'm like, hey, are you going to use those gloves? Yeah, do you need that hat? And so I now have like socks for Christmas for 27 of my closest friends. Let's say Canada on them, but no, super excited to be here today and to talk to you about. I've been listening for the last couple of days, all these great organizations and these great initiatives and these large groups of people collaborating and coming together. And I want to take just a few minutes and share with you some kind of amazing things that happen when a few wild and crazy people think outside the box and then do something wild and crazy, and you kind of learn some amazing things. So this all centers around access, inclusion, and mentorship. And we all talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. We've heard it, right? For the last couple of days, we all talk about it. But what does it really mean to do that? So I'm gonna take you on a little road trip we went on to kind of figure that out last year. So if you don't know, this is Judy Carey from MGH. She's in the room somewhere in the back here. There she is, my partner in crime. And we hit the road. And I want to share with you what we thought was going to happen, what actually happened, and what we learned from it. So just Why did we do this? Well, it actually started at the International Alliance in San Diego. And I was sitting at the dinner and I'm listening to everybody around me talk, and I didn't know the people at my table. And they're like, how do we get more people involved in clinical research? Why is clinical research really only Caucasian white people in the United States? How come they're only males? Do you think they're educated or whatever? And I'm looking around at these people thinking I'm being punked, and I turned to the girl next to me, a very nice young lady, and I said, well, if you want to know, why don't you ask them? And everybody kind of stopped chewing their salad. It was like really rough salad. I remember this kale salad. And they all stopped, and it happened to be that who I was sitting next to was Mary from Cytokinetics, who said, I'll give you some money if you want to rent a van and go talk to people. And this is how our van trip started. So with the help of Cytokinetics and MT Pharma, Judy and I hit the road as NEALS and MGH IRB approved study with the support of the ALS Association helping us find our way around because we're both geographically challenged. So Tracy Ali, if you're in the room, she helped us, her team, try to figure out how to do this. And here's what happened when we did this. So if you ever have heard the term social determinants of health, or SDOH, it's all those things that we all talk about when we ask the questions, if then, well, if they're educated, then will they do this? Or if they're of this culture, then will they do this? Or if they are not this, then will this not happen? And all of those things, in a nutshell, it's pretty much saying who you are matters, right? How you react in a situation, who you are, it does matter. And those are your social determinants of health. So we spent a long time at MGH looking at social determinants of health and deciding what we were going to do. It's not something that happened overnight. You can read this some other time, but it's been many years that we've been taking in at MGH, Mass General Hospital, sorry, I use those acronyms, question after question that come in from all over the world about clinical research, to where we created a patient navigation team that I talked about last year, and then we implemented technology to track the kinds of questions that we were getting, and then we created resources to support the kinds of questions that we were getting, and then we started partnering with the Les Turner Foundation, who's awesome at resources, so they could translate and make those even better. And so this has been a real process to that fateful night where Mary said, do you want to rent a van and go drive through New York? And we said, yeah, we do. And we put together a team. And this is our team under Dr. James Berry. And we decided that we are going to convince the IRB that we could learn a lot if we just went and talked to people in all different settings within the Massachusetts, New York area. The plan. Everybody knows why you have a plan, right? So you know it didn't happen. Our plan was to compare the knowledge about clinical research and participation in people living within 90 miles of a multidisciplinary clinic, according to those who weren't. And then we were going to take that information back to MGH, and the SDOH study that was already in progress, we were going to inform them what we've learned. We were going to make a few modifications to that study, and we were going to keep it going stronger than ever. That did not happen. We went to Plan B, and we realized right away at our first stop that we had several biases that we didn't even realize that we had when we wrote our IRB-approved questionnaires. We had assumptions and questions culturally that made sense to us, but we didn't realize we were already assuming things when we asked the question on the road. And we also realized there was absolutely no substitution to being there, to driving the drive people had to make, to doing what they had to do, to participate in clinical research, and to talking eye to eye with those people. So we did it. And the first thing we learned, write this down, if your car requires gasoline to run, put gasoline in the car if you expect it to run. Because when Judy came to pick me up, the car started beeping. I'm like, what's wrong with the car? She's like, don't worry, it's out of gas. I'm like, this is a road trip. Like, what are we gonna do? She's like, well, I kind of hoped I'd get gas before you noticed that. But we did make it, we got gas, and we headed out on our trip. And we went to different areas. So we went to urban areas, And they had different challenges. Like, it was kind of a drive to get out there, and there were times when traffic was bad, but when we got there, it was really beautiful, and it was peaceful, and it was a really good quality of life, right? So we're like, well, suburban, that's where those multidisciplinary clinics are. And by the time we got through that parking garage, we had said words we didn't even know either of us knew. It took hours to find a parking spot. We couldn't find the right building. Once you got into the place, you had every service you needed. Everybody was there to help you, but getting there was really, really difficult. So we headed out to rural America, and we drove and drove and drove and drove 1,200 miles, and it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful, and we had no services. We were crying because we could not find a cup of coffee. We were in the middle of nowhere at all, so they had very different challenges, right? And then we went to the VA. We were like, well, let's go to the VA and see how it is. And there we learned everybody knows the answer to the questions, but they all know the same answer to the same questions. Like, everybody fell in line, and we just kind of tried to fall in line with them. So every stop we went to had totally different challenges. What we came to was the universal truth that there's no single social determinant of health that creates an equity of access. It's a combination, and there's a gazillion combinations of those social determinants of health, and that we all, everybody impacted by ALS, struggles from the same challenges, just some people have more resources to overcome those challenges. And so it looks different depending where you are, but the bottom line, the bottom of everything was it came down to trust, who they trusted in their experience. And it wasn't, sorry clinicians if you're in here, it wasn't always their neurologist. A lot of times, like in rural America, it was the traveling nurse Trish, and we could not get in to see, like, between us and the ALS Association, we pulled every string we could. We could not find any patients in this area who would let us in until traveling nurse Trish called them, and they're like, oh, come on over. So we ended up extending our stay and traveling even further, just to talk to people who would let us talk to them because they trusted the people who cared for them. So in summary, we thought it would be really beneficial to move forward focusing on that universal design, to kind of remove barriers that everybody has in a way that the least common denominator benefits the most, but everybody benefits. So what we decided to do was that we needed more educational support, but we didn't need to educate patients because what we found out that geographically, it didn't matter. People out in the middle of nowhere, it wasn't that they didn't know about clinical research. They didn't necessarily want to participate in clinical research. And the people right next to the multidisciplinary clinic, it wasn't that they didn't know about research. They may or may not want to participate in clinical research. And we heard those same things. Like, for example, if they were slow progressing, they didn't want to take the risk and speed something up. And if they were fast progressing, they didn't maybe want to spend their time doing that. And even those common things such as transportation, like, think about it, like, look around the room, find a man that's like 6'2" or so. Imagine him laying on the floor, and I'm gonna say, hey, my car's parked in the parking garage across the street. Could you get this guy into the car for me to go to a clinical trial visit? Like, think about that. So when you get this poor fella into the car, it doesn't matter if you travel 5 miles or 500 miles. It wasn't a geographical issue. So we really needed to find a way to educate those healthcare providers and to support those healthcare providers, not the patients. The patients knew. People impacted by ALS, they know their challenges. Thank you, Jess. So we needed to look at the other side of the coin, and we needed to address diversity not at one level, but in communities that within themselves are diverse, such as in our world, veterans and asymptomatic carriers. We need to spread the word through publications because that is what you people in academia do. So We are in the process of partnering, if Fernando's in here, with ALS TDI on their new Trial Navigator tool for a provider version to push out information about clinical research into those hard-to-reach areas where people don't have to go look for it. If you're a provider, we're going to give you what you need at your fingertips. We are having quality discussions and new Pass It On project that you'll hear about in a couple of days for healthcare providers. It's going to be super cool, but trying to open those lines so that people can communicate and support each other from the healthcare provider aspect. Integration of the key communities. We're building, creating, offering, and providing additional services, working with Dr. Ileana Howard at the VA to and the new Veterans Actions Group under the ALS Hope Foundation. You're going to see wonderful things coming out of that group that we're really focusing on getting new messages dispersed out through that diverse community. And of course, spreading the word. We're working on publication 1, which is just our opinion about what we learned. Publication 2 will be our thematic analysis, and publication 3 will be the outcomes of that. And that's really important because we need to keep talking about this, because the truth is, hope shouldn't be a privilege. It should be something that exists for everybody, and who you are does matter, and you should have hope as well. So the publications are really important to us as well. But the bottom line is that we really believe that by knowing better, we can do better, and we can create better outcomes for everybody. So thank you for listening about our trip.
Thanks so much, Alison. That's fascinating. So, questions over there, please.
Hi, Jen DiMartino from ALS1. So my question is, once they let you to Fun Ladies into their home, did they open up to you about just general discussion about what their main frustration is about living maybe so far from, a hub, or, did it take them longer to get diagnosed? What were their main, I guess, complaints or issues that you took away from that?
Oh, thank you, Jen. That's a perfect question about what we learned, because we went away thinking that, oh, they must feel bad that they live so far from a multidisciplinary clinic. But the truth is, no, they didn't. They chose to live there, and they were perfectly happy. And we had put our expectations onto them. And so it might have been a few times that Judy said, Allison, you're such a snob on this journey, because I would say, well, don't you think they want that? And she's like, why do you think they want that? They didn't say they want that. They were very, very happy. The dog did bite me when I walked in, but we just had to deal with that. I think it was a me thing. But that was part of the bias that we learned, and people were very happy in whatever environment they chose. And I think the people who had the hardest time talking to us, and Judy, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, were past family members who had lost moms and dads, were the group that had the hardest time talking about what their experiences were.
Thanks. So one question just in front of you.
Hi. Sorry, didn't mean to yell that right into the microphone. I'm right over here, Alison. There you go. Sarah McGuire from ALS Canada. I really appreciate this initiative. Congratulations, this is amazing. I really appreciate you outlining the systemic and also personal unconscious bias. The thing that I'm curious about is the nature of unconscious bias is it's usually unconscious. So what was the thing that sparked your awareness before you even started this plan?
Such a brilliant question. So it didn't spark our awareness before the plan. And I'll tell you, we got a lot of pushback when we started talking about, hey, we're heading out on the road, and we kind of got a little bit of this, oh, that's so cute. Enjoy yourself. You guys are going to have so much fun. It was kind of like that. And then when we came back, and as we were calling people on the road going, we have to change our protocol because this is not right. And it happened for me when we sat down to talk to a healthcare provider, because we had went out to a very rural area, and the people were a genetic carrying family. And my partner wanted to really tell them that research was happening on their behalf, and they could participate and not know the results. And they were pushing back really hard and did not want to know. They did not want to be involved. And that's really sparked some conversation for us on the next drive, because I'm like, we really assumed everybody wanted to know. And we based our questions on that. And when we got to the next healthcare provider, we had a really long conversation with them, and she really schooled us a little bit about reading the room and how important that was. And I think that's when we kind of stopped and pivoted and said, let's look again at what we thought we knew. And that's how we were able to get some really good data out of it with the help of a data analyst. So
one last question with Katie, please.
Thank you. My question is about your outcomes publications. I assume, Allison, because I know you a little bit, that you probably talked broader with these people than just about their access to clinical research. You probably got into lots of, conversations about other frustrations and, do they go to support groups and things like that, because you're just a friendly person. So will you be looking at any outcomes outside of what the research project was initially for? And is that true that you ended up hearing lots of other stories that weren't related to research?
Thanks, Kathy, for the compliment and great question. So that's why we did it as a qualitative study, not quantitative. We were set up by our team to just talk. We talked to these people for hours. We asked some questions, but we just talked. And then we turned in all of our recordings, and a data analyst spent weeks and weeks and weeks coming up with the themes that came out of that and the different areas to focus on and how to delve down into that. And the reason that we chose not to start with that as our publications is because we can't statistically prove anything. It was a very small study. It was a random van that we went through a random East Coast area. So we wanted to set it up as an opinion, as a qualitative ethnographic study, share what we feel like we learned, share the outcomes from the qualified data analyst who gave us those themes, and then we'll start talking about each of those, how we're going to measure them, how we're going to approach them, and then we can start tracking the outcomes of what we've learned. And so next year I might have some more detailed numbers and data and information to share about that.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we'll stop there. Thank you for both speakers. This was absolutely fantastic. And we're up for a break until 3:45. So about 10 minutes.
Riders on the storm, riders on the storm. Into this house we're born, into this world we're thrown. Like a dog